says the province is moving to ban automated speed cameras. He says proposed legislation is expected on this as early as next month. In place of the cameras, the Premier says the government will instead establish a fund to help municipalities pay for other traffic calming measures. Think speed bumps, roundabouts, and raised crosswalks, among other things. Making the announcement in Vaughan yesterday, Premier Ford doubled down on municipalities that support the use of speed cameras. Here's what he had to say.
Over the last few years, we've seen municipalities across the province use municipal speed cameras as nothing more than a cash grab. Drivers across the province have received tickets for going just a few kilometers over the speed limit.
That's Premier Doug Ford speaking yesterday. His move is getting mixed reaction, with some municipalities like Barrie on board, but others, such as the Association of Ontario's municipalities and the province's police chiefs, are pushing back. Joining me now is Robin Jones. She's the president of the Association of Municipalities of Ontario. Good morning, Robin.
Good morning. How are you today?
I'm doing well, Robin. So I need to know, what is your reaction to the Premier's announcement?
So the Association of Municipalities of Ontario is disappointed with the Premier's decision to ban speed cameras. And this is because we know they work. There's been lots of studies. There's lots of evidence. And this is an opportunity for us to increase the safety in either school zones or community safety zones, and those are the only locations that these are allowed, where we have most vulnerable people, without having to try and get a police officer there to run radar.
You mentioned that AMO is disappointed with this decision, but the Premier says 407 out of 444 municipalities supports his move to ban speed cameras. Is that your sense as well, that 92% of municipalities would be happy to see the cameras gone?
So I'm not sure. I'm not sure of where the provincial government's getting their data, but just accepting on what the Premier said. However, the CAA from South Central Ontario found they also have done a study, and they have found that nearly 3/4 of Ontario drivers support its use in targeted areas like school zones and community safety zones. People understand that it's an important way of keeping people safe, particularly our children.
As you heard in that clip off the top, the Premier calls these speed cameras tax grabs and questions where the money is going. What is your reaction to that?
So I've heard the cash grab. I've heard tax grab. Let's be clear: the fines for speeding in a zone where the speed camera picks them up, the fine's paid by the speeder. It's not around tax dollars, and all of the money raised, or all the fines, go back into road redevelopment and creating and improving safety in the same areas. So it doesn't go into the general budget. It goes in. It's specific for making the road safer.
Robin, unfortunately, because of time, we'll have to leave it there. But thank you so much for joining us. Robin Jones is the president of the Association of Municipalities of Ontario. Joining us now with another reaction is the Mayor of Midland, Bill Gordon. Midland recently installed 2 speeding cameras. Mayor Gordon, good morning.
Morning again, Nav.
Yeah,
this is becoming a thing here. People are going to start to talk.
Yeah, I think a speeding camera segment with you, Mayor Gordon, is definitely becoming a thing here on Ontario Morning, because it was just 2 weeks ago that we had spoken about your installation of speeding cameras in Midland. But I need to ask you, what is your reaction to the Premier's announcement to ban speed cameras?
Well, the only constant seems to be change around this subject. So, it was disheartening yesterday as I watched municipalities that use the tool that his very government introduced in 2019 be vilified for using that tool to keep communities safe. And we're really late to this. This has been in use for years successfully. However, where I can give some credit, to the Premier's concerns is that there were municipalities, and probably arguably are still, ones that were jamming people for 1 to 5 over, both directions of the street. And, that if a police officer wouldn't give you a ticket for 1 to 5 over, these cameras shouldn't either. So there's validity to those concerns, and I think those could be easily addressed by him adjusting the legislation to set a limit or a threshold that's more in line with public reality and what police would use as a threshold when they're making a charge, no charge decision.
What are you hearing from residents right now regarding this entire issue?
It really is mixed. I mean, the feedback, most of the feedback I'm getting is on my social media where I engage with the community. And, we have some people that are critical of just about anything that we do. And as usual, they're on there. You can't really reason with them, no matter how many times I try. And there's a lot of people that get it and really support this initiative, especially the way we've done it. I've been adamant that our cameras don't give out tickets for 1 to 5 over. We're using a number that we came up with at the OPP that's very realistic. And it's a brand new program in the community. We announced it, almost a year ahead of time. We had all the mandatory notices, the 90 days. Like, we followed the law meticulously. And it went live September 2nd. And just the stats for the first 17 days, because we haven't even gone through a month yet. The first 17 days in this one street, we got 1,295 tickets issued, which is astounding. I mean, we knew the stats to justify putting the camera there in the first place, or we wouldn't have done it. You don't just pick these places out of the blue. But this really validated all the stats we got from our speed signs and all the other measuring devices we use. 963 of those tickets now for speeding between 10 and 20 kilometers over the limit. Any police officer would jam you for doing 20 over. 308 of those tickets were for speeds between 20 and 30 over the speed limit. That's going to light you up even on the 400 highway. And 23 of those tickets were for speeds over 30, and my high miler so far was 82 kilometers an hour in a 40 in front of an elementary school, which is where that's the first place we put these cameras, were in front of 2 elementary schools. So, anybody that wants to complain that this is a tax grab, will just take your foot off the gas pedal and obey the speed limits and slow down and save lives, for heaven's sake.
Mayor Gordon, just for clarification, you mentioned the speeding threshold. What is that threshold for Midland?
All right, so we don't announce the threshold per se, because then it becomes the new limit, right? So
gotcha.
It's 40. That's the speed limit. However, I have been assuring people, and I've said this publicly, that no one's getting a ticket between 1 and 9 over. I know it causes my staff to cringe because that gives away a fair bit, but that's the reality. And anyone that posts online, and believe me, there are people who are lying on the internet, hard to imagine, that's saying they got a ticket in Midland for 1 to 5 over or something like that. I challenge them to post their offense notice, or even privately send it to me. I'll validate the control number, and I'll disprove that assertion. So far, none of the heroes on the internet have taken me up on this option. So I've really been on a campaign of educating people about the rationale, and also trying to wade through all of the untrue statements that people are putting online, just because they feel they have an entitlement to speed, and because they have been speeding there for years. We have the stats to prove it. And the police officers aren't really there doing radar every day. They're out doing, the major part of their police work. People that are being held accountable now are feeling the sting in their wallet, as it's designed to do, and hopefully we're changing their behavior.
Mayor Gordon, when we did have you on last time, you said that the province benefits most from the fines and that much of the revenue goes directly back to them. So why do you think the Premier has framed this issue as a cash grab?
Yeah, it's a real head scratcher. It was $8.25 for every computer-to-computer lookup for the license plate. There's millions of those transactions that fund the MTO every single, it might be monthly, but for sure yearly. And then the victim fine surcharge is a floating percentage applied to every ticket, whether a cop writes it to you or a camera does. And that goes into the victim's slush fund charge. I honestly don't know where that money goes. I've never seen a press release saying how it's used, but the province holds that bag of cash. And then the actual value of the offense is all dictated by the province. None of this stuff is within a municipality's control. The only difference in this scenario is with our AMPS program, or Administrative Monetary Penalties program. Instead of sending these tickets to traditional courts, where half of them are abandoned, just because the courts are so backlogged, we process these in the municipality, which lets us keep a residual of the ticket value rather than going to the province. And that's what we've committed to putting back into traffic calming and community safety initiatives. And you'll see those things on my 2026 budget, whether they're funded by the offenders or funded by the taxpayers. As the Premier is now suggesting that he'll put a fund together that municipalities could access. And again, there's a head scratcher. Right now, it's being funded completely outside of the tax-paying base, and it's being funded by the offenders. And we're going to pivot now to taxes, which is exactly what we didn't want to do with this.
Well, Mayor Gordon, let's actually hear a clip from the Premier, because he did mention, as you alluded to, that they were going to introduce new measures that will replace speed cameras. Here's what Premier Ford said regarding what that would look like.
This includes new flashing signs that will slow down drivers in school zones and protect students. It also includes speed bumps, roundabouts, raised crosswalks, curb extensions, and other types of enforcement that will keep communities safe without squeezing more money out of the taxpayers.
Now, Mayor Gordon, correct me if I'm wrong, but I do recall during our last conversation that you mentioned that these are things that Midland is already doing.
Yeah, we've been doing it for years now. If there's nothing new in this announcement, we're announcing sliced bread here. Okay, so we have these installations, and some of them are very expensive. Things like roundabouts. If we were to try and put those inside our settled part of our community, we'd be like taking over people's homes and kicking them out. And we need that land to build roundabouts. There's a lot of real estate needed. But things like speed cushions, speed bumps, which are seasonal. Speed cushions can be used year round. These flare outs. There's bollards. All of these things that he suggested, and the flashing lights, we do that now. We have the speed indicating signs. Some are solar, some are hardwired. We have a trailer we drag around. That's where we got a lot of our metrics to justify these cameras and their locations. So we're doing that, and we've been paying for those out of tax dollars. And, we've been doing that for years. So, we use the provincial tool in the toolbox, these ASCs, and put together the AMPS program so that the offenders will pay for future growth in these traffic calming initiatives. Now that's being arbitrarily stripped of us with, despite empirical evidence and pleas from the chiefs of police and, all the people with the science and that know what they're talking about, that's going to be stripped of us. And instead, we're going to pivot back to using tax dollars, whether it's my municipal tax dollars or provincial tax dollars. Make sense to me, Dav.
And I do want to talk about costs and dollars because the cost to dismantle these systems and get out of these contracts would be significant. So what is the estimated cost to the town of Midland and its taxpayers?
So we put a press release about this out yesterday. So if we're contracted with Newmarket. So we're not one of the municipalities that spent, Brampton and stuff, that spent hundreds of millions of dollars setting up these joint processing centers and then farm themselves out to smaller municipalities. We are one of the small municipalities. So we partner with Newmarket. We have a contract with them, a brand new, fresh contract. If we were to exit that right now, just to try and appease, the political, winds of change and say, hey, we want to push pause on our system, Newmarket. Well, we'd have to pay the $200,000, which is about over a 1% tax increase in Midland to exit that contract. It'd be just completely financially irresponsible. However, if we let the system run, because it's legal, until the Premier actually makes it illegal through royal assent with whatever he's going to do, then we can exit the contract using the force majeure clause, which doesn't cost our taxpayers any money. So I'm inclined to, not dump even more money down the garbage chute, but we'll let this program run because it's legal until it's not. And, when the Premier, and I believe he will, introduces legislation to remove this tool from our toolbox, then we can exit without any, additional damages and costs from exiting the contract early.
Mayor Gordon, lastly, in your opinion, what is it about this issue of speed cameras that makes it so divisive?
Well, in our community, it seems that we picked a school zone. I could have put this on any of our community safety zones where the speed's 50, but we picked school zones to go first because they were the ones with all the stats that proved the speeders were there, and the tickets issued proved that as well. The fact that it goes down to 40 kilometers an hour, and we used to do that, intermittently. There'd be flashing lights saying, when the lights are flashing, it's 40, which was traditionally a school day. To remove ambiguity and to align ourselves with every other street, we've dropped down to 40, which aren't school zones in town. We took those flashing lights out, and we put all the requisite legal signs up that say 40 kilometers begins, 40 kilometers ends, and the camera's in that 40-kilometer zone. There seems to be a segment, a really vocal segment, at least online, that is fixated on the fact that those flashing lights are gone. So I took that suggestion to the Premier and said, hey, Premier, if you really like the flashing light things, we happen to own a few that we just took down, and they're pretty cheap to buy. Why don't you make us bolt that onto the sign that says speed camera in use? And hoping that might appease them. And it didn't. So I think whatever lobby or, poll is really, moving this with the province is very powerful. And I have a sneaking suspicion, since the tickets don't generate any type of insurance hit for people or demerit points, the only ones that would be adversely impacted by, constantly speeding and having these fines would be commercial vehicle operators. And I got to wonder whether it's CVOR holders and a very strong lobby, whether it's trucking industry or what have you, that's really, really, really pushing back on the Premier. And I don't think it's Mrs. Smith going to yoga class or coming back from the library, that's really driving this problem. But at the end of the day, we're creatures of the province. He said it. I know it. We'll do as we're told. And I don't have to agree with everything, Dad does, in this parent-child relationship. We'll follow the law, and which means these cameras will remain in place, well deployed, using reasonable thresholds until he makes them illegal, and then we'll follow the rules.
Mayor Gordon, we will leave it there, but thank you so much for your perspective.
Hey, always a pleasure. Thanks, Dev.
Bill Gordon is the mayor of Midland. It could